This podcast series was recorded with our colleague Cameron Cunningham, who at the time was the Addictions and Recovery Program Coordinator at NBA. Although he no longer works with us, we still believe strongly in the content we created, and we hope you enjoy.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Holy Scrolls, where faith meets tech. I'm Cameron Cunningham.
And I'm Bere Soto, and I am so glad that you're here for this conversation about social media, young adults, and the ways that technology is shaping us and our mental health, our relationships, and especially to our spiritual lives.
Yes, this podcast is a collaboration between NBA's Addiction and Recovery Initiative and the Young Adult Leadership Development Program.
And today we are diving into a topic that I think it was important before and then after COVID. I think it got more prominent, and it is, can digital community truly meet our need for connection, or does does it do the opposite? Does it isolate us?
Yes, and to help us have this conversation, we're joined today by Reverend Taylon E. Lancaster. Reverend Lancaster is a rising thought leader. He's an activist and a servant whose ministry stands at the intersection of Christianity and community empowerment. Proud graduate of Clark Atlanta University with the Bachelor's of Arts. Yay to Clark. He earned a BA in religion and philosophy, and he also is a proud graduate of Harvard Divinity School, where he earned a Master's of Divinity, and he served in key leadership roles, supporting students of African descent and fostering academic community engagement. In 2023, Reverend Lancaster became the youngest pastor of the historic Third Baptist Church in Springfield, Massachusetts. We celebrate you. We celebrate you. And Third Baptist Church is the city's oldest Black Baptist congregation. Under his leadership, the church has experienced renewed vitality through community block parties, monthly food drives, and even strategic partnerships that expand the holistic service and most especially address social inequities. Reverend Lancaster's commitment to preaching the gospel and championing community development has broadened his impact not only in Massachusetts, but across generations in the United States, Liberia, Israel, and even beyond, making him one of the leading emerging trusted voices for spiritual and social transformation.
Wow, welcome, Reverend Taylor. We are
Thank you, Bray. Thank
so
you, Reverend Cameron. Thank you both for this opportunity.
Yes. It's exciting to have you here because I think your experience and your whole self will enrich this conversation because your life really touches many points of our topic today, which
Yeah.
is, as we were saying, can social media really help us foster community, or does it actually isolate us? And I
Yeah.
think that your perspective as a pastor would be really rich on this, especially as a young pastor. I'm not going to out you here with
Yeah.
your
On my
age,
age.
on my age, right? Because your wisdom goes beyond your age. But you're one of the youngest pastors I think that your congregation has had, if not the youngest,
Yes. Yes.
of the oldest Black church in a city. So I think that that's very worth noting.
Absolutely.
And as I was saying in the introduction, COVID impacted our lives, especially our sense of community in communities of faith in a way that we had never experienced, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Now we have, even as a minister, now we have online pastors sometimes that they just focus on people who log online and
Yeah.
they just shepherd them and pastor them. They never visit in person, or
Hmm.
rarely do. And it's crazy for me to think about that, because if I were to tell my grandma, like, oh yeah, I have my online pastor, she's gonna be like, you're what? Like, that
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense.
Yes.
So with all this rambling that I've been doing, and for you as a pastor, do you think that digital communities can really meet our needs spiritually, emotionally, physically, socially, however you want to answer this? I'd
Yes.
love to hear.
My short answer is no. If it is that we isolate digital communities and expect them to do the work of physical engagement and human connection, we know, the digital age, this age of AI, this age of information, cannot replace how the human connection that we have with one another. However, it can serve as a supplement, if you would, as an adjective to what it is that is happening in the building and in the four walls. And so, what I've tried to do, even in my context in Springfield, Massachusetts, is to center our human experience and allow the digital media outlets to enhance what's happening in person. And the analogy that I use, Brett, it's this kind of analogy that the difference between a fireplace that is electric and a fireplace that has an actual chimney, wood, etc. And I tell the people all the time at church that we have a lot of members who join online. We didn't have any live stream available before I got.
Listen, I was there with you.
You feel me, right? So
yes,
pastors, we were kind of ambidextrous within the pandemic in terms of being producers, pastors, and still doing
audio techs, like marketing experts.
Right? We're wearing so many different hats. And so within this analogy, I tell them, I say, whenever it is you come to church, you get a real experience of a fireplace. Coming up in the Northeast, now being here 4 years, I've got a chance to see the beauty of a fireplace and the smoke coming out the chimney. Ooh. And how you can smell the wood. But the difference between being in Florida, where I'm originally from, is that we use electric fireplaces. So we don't smell the wood. We don't get a chance to the full experience. And so that, I would say, is the kind of the dualistic tension that we face in between digital and our human experience, real in a physical manner. And so I'm always trying to tell people, you can still get warm from online or digital experience, but there's nothing like that real internal warmth that you'll get knowing that people love you, they value you, they care for you. And I don't want us to replace that, because at the core of what we do, all of us need that community. In fact, there's a book by the name of Sherry Turkle entitled Alone Together. And, she kind of pushes this idea that we are all living in the epidemic of loneliness. And if we mismanage technology and we mismanage the digital age, we'll feel all alone and we'll be together. And so trying to make sure that even in our gathering that we don't feel alone.
Yeah.
Wow. No, this is so good. If I want to jump in right here.
Yes,
because,
please. Yeah.
Reverend Taylor, you brought something up for me, and thank you for naming the tension, even now in this post-COVID era, because I do believe that digital communities are capable, as you said, to meet some needs. That's that electric fireplace. I love that analogy.
I know, I wrote it down. I'm like, oh,
yes,
that's good.
But I appreciate you naming that, although we recognize it can meet and it has the capabilities to meet some needs, it may not be able to meet all needs at the same depth. So I'm thinking about how, psychologists, have this term called perceived closeness. And it's literally this idea, this thought, this sense of someone being with you, to your point, even when you're distant away from each other. So I think about how, digital communities has allowed churches, has allowed pastors to add another layer to spiritual formation, to reflection, to effective pastoral care. But then I'm also thinking about the second part, that wood chimney that you speak about. And that's that social, that physical element that says our bodies do matter.
Yes.
And it's this thought that our embodied presence actually does have meaning to the communities and to the ways in which we communicate, beyond what's digitized. So the tone of your voice in person may be a little different than it is behind the screen. Or, the way that you follow with eye contact, or your silence, the way that you process, the nonverbal communications that we oftentimes may look over on screen or even digital communities. We see that, we feel that, we wrestle with that, while we're in person. So I'm just thinking through that, and I'm thinking through how we believe and that God's presence does show up, in flesh, in space. But digital communities are valuable, but in
Yeah.
person is that comprehensive thought. So I just wanted to add that because, yeah, you got something there with that electric chimney and and that wood chimney. That's good.
Yeah,
You should
and
use
to
it
your
for a sermon series if you haven't, Pastor. But
Yes,
and you know
yes.
what? I may use it as an analogy this Sunday.
yes, do it, do it. You know, and
But as I
especially
was
for homecoming Sundays, like that's a good analogy. And I think
yes,
if we stay on this, I
yes,
think that the three of us have been pastoring. You are currently pastoring, Taylon. So I think that one thing that was coming up for me is also being mindful of the cultural differences and what physical touch, physical presence, the laughter, the call and response in church, even the call and response when we're gossiping with our girlfriends and our, like, that's right, or no, and say it, or, stuff like that. It does something different. I don't want to speak generally,
yeah,
but it's been my experience. For me that I pastored Latino, multicultural Latino congregation before this role, it, it- our Sundays were live. And so when COVID hit, it was horrible. Because for us, not only as Latinos, we are very touchy people, we are very like together people.
yeah,
But in the context of the church that I was pastoring, which it was mostly, I think it was an 85 or 90% immigrant population, church became our family, right? And so what you're talking about, that we cannot see each other, we cannot touch each other, we cannot be in togetherness. And for some of us who are introverts, that for a period of time was kind of a blessing, because as a pastor, I could just close the computer and not get drained afterwards, and it was good. But then I started missing that coffee talk after church, or those Thursdays that we're supposed to go to Bible study, but we actually just catch up with our lives and share cookies and chocolate or whatever we're eating. But yeah, I think that there is also something to say about the cultural differences of what physical touch means.
yeah. And I think that you're absolutely right. And there are certain populations of people who value personal connection than others.
Yeah.
I think for those of us that have been oppressed, not only do we value closeness to God, but we value closeness to our fellow man, fellow woman. That allows us to have a closeness to God, because we are all made in the image and likeness of God. And so these digital apparatuses, if you would, allow us to, in a real sense, to stay connected. And I want to circle back to something that Reverend Cunningham shared, which was this idea of perceived closeness, and what is the
Mm,
church doing uh, on a week-to-week basis to ensure that people are connected. I think that because of the digital age in which we're living in, it's to an extent that we have to live within the threats as well as the positive ways in which it grants us the way to connect with one another as well. These technical and these physical, I would say, benefits to
mm,
us. However, when you ask Cameron about how are we staying connected to our members outside of a Sunday to Sunday basis, one thing is through the platform we're using right now, Zoom, allowing persons to sign up for time. Well, this is Google Meets, but Zoom, allowing persons for time to meet with us. And during that time, they're meeting with me, they're meeting with our church administrator. And so if you can't come in person, you can get whatever it is that you need by way of Zoom, as well as to your point, the cell phone. I think that these things right here, if they're properly managed, this allows me. I stay an hour and a half from my church, and
yeah,
so I'm not in close proximity. However, they feel as though I'm close because they
right.
have a number and I'm always accessible. And so I
Yeah,
think that we have to not be controlled by these devices or by technology, but instead kind of reclaim the ownership of digital devices to say, because of these people that matter so much to me, like you were saying, Barrett, like this is family, you know,
yeah,
I'm utilizing this as a way to continually stay connected. And Lord forbid we have another pandemic, which is
yes,
why most churches, in full transparency, have to embrace a hybrid model.
yep,
Um, we have to embrace a hybrid model, even with those that we love. Not all times are we able to get home for Thanksgiving or for special holidays, but FaceTime, Zoom, and other, once again, platforms and media outlets allow us to stay connected. And I don't want us to devalue that, because like I said, it's like this, it's dualistic, right? And it's us having to kind of stand in the middle of that balance and being.
Yes, yes. And I think for young people, balance and honesty is huge. Like, I think this new generation is a generation that they don't take, they don't like to sugarcoat things. It's like, just tell me like it, the way it is, don't go around the bushes. And they're very good at picking up when we are being uh, consumerist or about them, and just asking about something about them just when we need things, or just reaching out when we need things. And they're like, no, 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 no. Don't just come and look for me when you need. Like, what are you actually giving me? And that's, I think, the struggle for the church these days, that we have to rethink how are we creating community for folks, just like you mentioned it, Reverend Taylon, that we have to embrace this hybrid model from now on. That is something that's not going away. And what are we doing for folks, also young adults that have very busy schedules, and that maybe going in person to church activities or to even social events, it just doesn't make sense, because not only is it time, but it's even resources. And those who are in more of the adult side of the young, they are now working, they have bills, they have student loans, they have stuff that they have to pay. And even getting on the metro or using my gas, it's an expense that I don't know if I can afford. So,
And
yeah,
there
go
is
ahead.
a cost. No, and I don't want to just say there's a cost to community.
That's where I'm trying to get.
And in the digital age, and let's call it out, right? Let's say, like, our lives, life be lifing. Life is
Yeah.
real. Stresses of life are real. However, the cost of community is inconvenience. And the digital age has made everything so convenient. And so we discount physical connection at the expense of technical advancement. And so it's so important for us to recognize the cost of community, that it costs something to be within this group of orbit of influence of people who genuinely care about you. However, it's invaluable.
Yes.
And it's invaluable because, like you said, it's a lifeline. Without this, I literally don't know if I will survive. And I think that it is a layered thing. It begins with psychological, right? Invading your mind and negative thinking, and then it impacts your sociology because of the way you're thinking. You don't want to be around anyone, and thus impacting your physiology, how you feel in relation to not only technology but just in community. And so, whatever we do, I feel like what it is that you're pushing us to see, and what it is that I'm kind of bringing forth, is this invaluable aspect of community that happens in person, which begins in person. I want to bring us back to that. The in-person community experience is centered, and everything else around it is kind of complementary.
I love that. I love that. I think this is a great time for us to probably pause, because we're getting so excited, and we still have more things that we want to talk about with Reverend Taylon. So if you all want to indulge us in just a brief pause for a minute and hear about what's happening in the life of NBA and how you all can continue engaging with us, we'll be back. Don't leave us. We'll hear, and I hope that you stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Stay updated with NBA events. There's still time to apply for the 1-year peer learning and wellness group for Disciples affiliated Black, Indigenous, and other women of color ages 22 to 30. The participants of this peer group will experience community, spiritual renewal, and leadership support through online meetings and 2 in-person retreats. Don't miss this opportunity. Applications will remain open just for a few more days, closing on March 1st. For more information, visit nbacares.org/bywork. speaking of applications, the Mission and Ministry Grants application window is open now through March 25th. These funds support organizational and congregational projects that serve older adults aged 50 and up, or focus on educating at-risk youth and young adults between 10 and 25 years old. For details and frequently asked questions, visit nbacares.org/mm-grants. Next week, on March 4th, NBA Older Adults Ministry will host the What the Silver Chalice Offers the Life of the Church webinar. And on March 26th, NBA's community engagement team presents a webinar called From Montgomery to Minneapolis, Organizing in Times of Disruption. Learn more and register for this and other events at nbacares.org/events.
All right, we are back and we have so much more to talk about. This has been exciting. I want to go deeper. Before we go higher. We
right.
have teased out these ideals of community, of belongingness, of what exudes from us sharing space, even if it is virtual or digital. And then what we gain when we gather in our embodied presence. It brings to mind the thoughts, the concepts of the mystic Howard Thurman. And he talks about the beloved community. And I really want to bring in his voice here, because I think this idea of the beloved community is foundational, and specifically to this context that we're talking about, as it relates to connection. So I just want to pose the question, what does Thurman's beloved community look like in a digital age?
Yeah. For me, I would say that it is a space and place where people are able to be loved freely and are able to love freely. One of the things that I am intrigued by Cone when he says there's a bit of God in every person, right? And this idea that there's God in everyone. And once again, while we've talked about the benefits of technology, we also recognize the threats. We also recognize the way in which people are bullied. Cyberbullying takes place. We also understand the way in which even sex trafficking is propagated, if you would, with technology. And so I think that when Thurman is talking about this beloved community, it is this closeness, this connection to one another, that the hounds of hell that he mentions in the disinherited, fear, deception, and hatred essentially dissipate because of the beloved community. And so in relation to the digital age, right, we recognize how it can bring about a level of fear. It can bring about a level of deception and self-perception. Do we see ourselves the way other people see us? And then also hatred, right? It can cause not only this hate for the in-person encounter or people that you see physically, or hate for the platform, because you miss the physical engagement that you once experienced. And so I think that the goal for society and where people are is to continually to live in a space where they can freely love and freely be loved without the violence, discrimination, all the other various parts that kind of prohibit us living life to our fullest extent as humans freely.
Yes.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I think that Thurman even defines it, and I have it here because I didn't want to say it wrong, but he frames community as the ultimate goal of life. And I love that because as people of faith, if we think back, very first in scripture, we hear, right, when God is, and when we hear the story of creation, that God is saying it's not good for people to be alone. It's not good for humans to be alone. And then, it creates community. God from the beginning realizes, hold on, one person in and of themselves is not what I want. I want people to be in community. And then even when, they mess up, God stays in community with them. It's like, where are you all? Like, what's going on? What's happening? Like, I'm not gonna leave you. I just want to know, where are you? What's happening? And then connected to that, Thurman says that then, if community is the goal, isolation from a faith perspective, then isolation is sin. And it's just like, as an introvert myself, that's a struggle. And I think that a lot of young adults these days, they're just, they put on their AirPods. They're just looking at their on their phone, and I'm not throwing shade at any of this. I'm just saying they're just so, because of how, just as you were saying, because there's just so much going on around us. It's like, let me just isolate. Let me just not bother about all the violence, death, and stuff that is trying to break my soul,
Mm.
and just do me. And at the
Yeah.
same time, I think that ends up being an isolating that we
Yes.
are not being aware of, right?
Yeah, and it goes back to this idea that we all learned in grade school, probably perhaps even earlier than this. Sharing is caring.
Oh, I know. I think it was kindergarten, like, sharing
Yes.
is
Yeah,
caring.
we learned that, and the greatest way to bring it, it's not just about what we give to each other, but giving of your time, giving of
Mm,
yourself, is the most valuable thing. And the reason why I say that is because we have to recognize that we share a lot together than what we may realize. We live in a
mm.
shared lived experience. It's a
Yes.
shared lived experience. Things that the pandemic, we all may have experienced it differently, but we shared that pandemic together, right? And so within that, I think that even Thurman is kind of pushing us to see this life from a universal perspective.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we see ourselves so distinctively different that we can't recognize this shared loneliness, this we feel, this shared desire for connection as well. So absolutely. Right.
Yes.
Okay, so go ahead, Cameron. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna wedge in right here. This is
Go
good.
for it.
No, because I'm thinking this, and you all are speaking of this shared union of life feeding on life itself, and creating this community where no one feels reduced, no one is ignored, no one is dismissed, even digitally in the digital age. So as you all were speaking, the thought came to my mind, and this is not a question, but I think this becomes the question post what we're discussing. It is, how do we honor the humanity of people we only meet through the screens?
Mm,
Because it's about, when we think about beloved community, dignity, and as Reverend Taylor, you said, this mutual responsibility. So this discipline, it's almost this discipline of, resisting the patterns that dehumanize and really destruct community, intentional bonds. So I don't know. I wanted to add that. I wanted to add that because I think, again, it's a discipline and it does apply digitally too. So although, the medium changes from interacting in person to maybe being in digital communities, in groups, virtually, I think that the mandate for seeing the whole person still remains. And I think that is what serves as, the bedrock, the foundation of this beloved community, forming, flourishing, even, when we transition in this AI digital world.
yes, yes. And I think that you mentioned this aspect of commitment and intentionality. And I think that that's key for internet and social media and all of these spaces to really become a true sense of community. Is not, oh, let me just log into my Zoom Bible study so that they see that I'm on, right? Or let me not just log into this get together Zoom connection that we're having just so that they see that. And then I'm over here with my phone, and then I'm over here watching TV. So it's like
Cooking
this,
dinner.
right? Eating dinner and not really paying attention. Is this idea that Reverend Taylor you brought up, that time and presence is one of the greatest gifts that we can actually give people, whether it is on FaceTime or it is on face to face time, right? Like it's whether on FaceTime or face to face time. I think our time and presence needs to be intentional. And that's something that I think we can start um, thinking about that as maybe our listeners can help us think through this, right? Like, how are they doing this in an era with such busy lives for everyone? How are we being intentional
Mhm.
and generous with our attention and our time to still stay connected in an era that the more and more with this capitalist and consumerist world that we live in, that we need to be so busy, we don't have time to build that sense of beloved community in person. Um, yeah, those are just ponderings that I was thinking
No,
on.
and I appreciate both the two of you for your contributions to this conversation. Because Cameron, to your point, the dehumanizing. I like how you did not make the digital age synonymous with dehumanization,
Yes.
right? Like there are ways in which that technology uplifts our humanity, but we once again as humans must take agency over the ways in which we allow it to dehumanize people. Or to your point, just Bray, just making sure that we're intentional in these efforts. And I'll give an example as to how both of these concepts that you all are speaking of, or these ideas, kind of come together in a real way. And that is, one time I was in a class at Harvard Divinity School, and we were on Zoom, and of course we just usually get on, usually just hop on, and we're sharing and we're doing what it is that we do. And there was a time that I had a colleague that did not share anything. They just did not share. It was like, yeah, trying to figure out, like, and then my professor was like, well, I would like to hear from so and so. We haven't heard from you today. We
Mm,
want bringing you into the conversation. And then it was a follow up. How are you doing today? Right.
mm-hmm.
And in that instance, we recognized that it just wasn't a good day for her. It just
Yeah.
wasn't a good day. And by bringing her forth, calling her in, allowed her to really express how she was feeling. And it was a turnaround. We ended that Zoom call laughing and talking about all the richness of what we were discussing in that class. And so I think that while we are talking about the ways in which we engage in a digital age, I just want to kind of push that, like, we have to do the intentional effort to make sure that people are seen, that they are
Mm,
valued, and they are cared, even on these digital platforms. Because what we can do in person, which is a kind of somewhat default, automatic, people get the warm embrace, we kind of have to do the extra work to make sure
yes.
people are seen. If it is
Yes.
that we want to make sure that these connections online are intentional, or in the word that you use, Reverend Cunningham, but deeper, not just wider.
Yes. Yeah, and I think that that should happen not only, in class, but I'm so glad that your professor was emotional intelligent enough to realize, hold on, like this person usually shares and they're not sharing what's happening. But also, in church, I as a young adult, as a teenager, and even still as an adult, I thoroughly dislike when, good old sister would come to me after I have not been at church for 2 or 3 weeks because of whatever. And she's like, oh, we've missed you. Well, have you? You have not called me. You just want to know what I've been up to. Like, don't you lie?
Come on.
Don't you lie? You just want to know why I'm not in church instead of,
Yes.
I want to know what's happening. I want to know what's going on in your life. We really miss you or notice your absence, which is different, right? Because if you say you miss me, girl, you haven't. Like you've just noticed my absence, which is
Hmm.
different.
Wow.
And also I think that even with group texts, right? I have a group of friends that only two of us now still live in the same city,
Mm.
but because of church, we met, and now because of church and ministry and life, we've gone to different states. And something that you said, Reverend Taylon, this whole idea of, maybe those were not your words, but made me think of this combination of accountability and care
Mm.
in a digital life so that we can build community. I think that those are really needed. We have this um, thing about, if we have not heard from either one of the girls on the chat, we check in and said, hey, just as you said, that made me think of your professor, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, how you doing? Like, hey, Bere, you doing okay? We haven't heard from you in 2 days. Just doing a health check, like, wellness check. What's going on? Um, and I think that as we start wrapping up, I don't want to put us all on the spot, but what can we tell our young adults about how can they, just as Cameron, you were saying, not demonizing social media or internet spaces against community, but how can we help them do both? Because I think they've grown in such an social media, internet-based life, and a lot of them may not even know how to do community in person. And so, how can we help them stay true to both and be mindful of creating community, true community, beloved community, whether it is online or in person, but to really stay connected? This whole idea of it's a basic need, right? To belong, to be in community. So, what are your thoughts about that as we start closing our
Yeah.
episode today?
Yes, this has just been a very meaningful conversation, and so much has been stated and shared as to how it is that we navigate this digital age. And I leave this kind of clarion call to the next generation or young adults is that we not ever um, devalue the cost of true community,
Mm,
in the presence of those that we love and those that care after the lives that we live. That community that shapes and forms us is invaluable, and it's worth the sacrifice, right?
mm,
It's worth the sacrifice, and you may not recognize it now because of the age of convenience, right? But your inconvenience uh, plays a dividend in terms of the next generation of not only believers, but just spiritual formation and community. And so just encourage the next generation of young adults and young adults now to just continue to inconvenience yourself, because the inconvenience um, ultimately, once again, is invaluable and allows those bridges to be built, allows that beloved community to be created. And the beloved community is never ending. Each and every person, we're always doing that work, right, to expand and to bring each other together. But what recognize in this age of great convenience, that sometimes we have to inconvenience ourselves for what matters.
yes.
I would jump in right here. This is like everyone has said, a great conversation, meaningful dialogue from one young adult to my peers that are young adults. I would say that it's important for us to remember that both worlds can coexist, but they're
Mm,
not interchangeable at times.
mm,
So I think it's important for us, and like I said, I keep returning to the rise of artificial intelligence and how that is transforming our digital communities. I think it's important for us to remember that we can use digital spaces to connect widely, but this embodied community that we've spoken about is the means in which we've come to know deeply, if you will. So digital communities, sparks relationships, but it is that intentional embodied community that will grow them.
yeah.
So I say to any leader or to any pastor, clergy, or peer that's even listening to our conversation today, it's important to, even 5 years post the start of the COVID pandemic, to continue to create these hybrid opportunities,
Mm,
these moments where digital almost functions as a doorway to something that's physical, that's tangible. So to see it as an entry point, not replacing the screen, but using it almost as an invitation to usher communities into community, with greater texture and responsibility. So yeah, that's what I would say to that question, because I still think, again, and I'll close right here on this point. There is something special about touch, presence, and shared life as well.
mm. Wow, wow, so deep. I think that we need a season two just for this matter and for this topic. Thank you all. Thank you all for your input, your wisdom, sharing yourselves today. Thank you everyone for listening and exploring the tension between connection and isolation and the role of social media and internet online communities about this. Thank you, Reverend Taylon, for being with us today. It
Thank
was wonderful to be with you today. We're gonna leave on the comments in the description of this episode ways in which they can connect with you, maybe ways in which they can online connect with you, and then they can be ushered using Cameron's analogy, right? They can usher themselves, or you can usher them into a true sense of community. Thank you, Reverend Taylor.
you.
Yes, and we would love to hear your stories. You heard from us. We would love to hear from you through our comments or even tag us to let us know, how do you share or find belonging online? We would love to hear
Mm.
your stories.
Yes, and our next episode, episode 5, will dive into online dating and authenticity. I'm here for it.
Oh,
So
yes.
I hope that you all stick with us. We're gonna be with the Reverend Whitney Marie Murphy, also known as the Reverend I Do. She is going to talk with us about performative lives, vulnerability, and what real connection and true love look like in a digital age.
Yes, I cannot wait. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. But until then, stay grounded, stay safe, and remember, community is more than clicks. It's care, it's accountability, and it's an inconvenience worth taking. Thank you and see you next time.
Thank you all. Bye bye.